Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 9th meeting of CB11's Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee. My name is Elsie Encarnacion, and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at 6:35 p.m. tonight. We are joined by our district manager, Angel Muscane, who is the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click on the participants icon, the participants panel should appear and you should find the raise your hand function there. If you're still having technical difficulties, you may click on the chat icon and relay your difficulty to the staff. Members should not engage in back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat function should not be used for CB11 business or questions about the agenda. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us of any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that has already been stated aloud for the record during the meeting. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you may speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom and wait to be recognized. We will now take attendance by roll call. Board members, you may unmute yourself and answer present when your name is called.
Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Elsie Encarnacion.
Present.
Ivy Hume. Francis Mastroda. Jessica Morris is excused. Andrew Padilla.
Present.
Finney Torres. Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Candy Vives Vasquez. Ivy Hume.
Present.
Thank you. You have quorum.
Thank you, Angel. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was also posted online. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you do object to the agenda, you may raise your hand now through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. We do not have minutes from our last meeting, so we will probably, Angel, correct me if I'm wrong, will we be approving that maybe at another meeting or?
We could do them at the next one on the 22nd.
Okay, perfect. So we'll do that. And then we'll go right into announcements. Angel, if you could. Is it announcements or informational updates? I'm sorry. Oh, no, announcements.
So as was just referenced, the next meeting of this committee, the Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee, has been scheduled for June 22nd at 6:30. That's 2 weeks from today, 2 weeks from yesterday. The agenda will include a public hearing on the proposed citywide hotels text amendment, as well as presentations by the Department of City Planning on the proposed Fresh 2 text amendment, the proposed Health and Fitness citywide text amendment, and the proposed open restaurant text amendment. We've also invited DOT to join DCP for that presentation, the Department of Transportation. That concludes the announcement.
Thank you, Angel. There is no informational updates on my end. So we'll move right into presentations and discussions. Our first is from St. Cecilia's Church on an accessibility project application to the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Paul, are you with us and able to unmute? Or Mitchell? Yes, there you go.
Hi, this is Mitchell. Hi. So can I share my screen, Ms. Chairperson?
Believe Angel.
Sure, just give me 1 second, Mr. Kurtz, and I'll give you the detail.
Excellent.
Go ahead, you can proceed.
Excellent, thank you. Is Father Mushi on the line? Because I think he wanted to make an introductory comment.
Yes, I'm here.
Father Mushi, would you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself and the project? And
Yes, I'm Father Peter Mush, pastor of St. Cecilia Church, and they were been working on various projects on the church and in the church. And now we come to the final, one of the final projects to make accessible to the people who are handicapped, our elderly, especially our elderly, who cannot come up the steps. And we are going to try to get the lift from the ground, the pavement ground, up to the first floor or the landing of inside the church. And Mitchell will take over and let us know what is really taking place.
very good. Thank you for having us as guests to your committee. The church asked me and my firm, my colleagues, to look at how to effectuate just what Father Mushi said, how to get people from the sidewalk up to the church level, which is at the top of the stairs shown in the photograph. Does everybody see the drawing that says picture of the church and my name?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
Excellent, thank you. So after various other architects and years had passed, there are various schemes, all of which were very intrusive and difficult and expensive. And we ended up starting with a very simple approach. Can we make a exterior inclined wheelchair lift work? And I think the answer is yes, although you and your colleagues and the people at the Landmark Commission will tell us how you feel about it. We've actually presented this to LPC in a very informal beginning way, and they were encouraging. So that gave us the encouragement to proceed with it. So this on the left is a photograph. It shows that we're looking south towards the church. There's a 3-arch portico, and we're going to aim to put a lift here in the eastmost portion of the portico. I have, oh, there it is. Okay. So this is a rendering. It's on top of the photograph you just looked at, and it shows the lift in place. Now, the good news is that you can probably barely see it, and which I think is actually the good news, which is it's hardly intrusive. We did take away a piece of the fence over here. There's fence on this west side that's symmetrical, but it needs to be removed in order to gain access to the lift. The lift is mounted on, and we'll see some close-ups, but I like this view because it shows the kind of minimum trace-like impact that it has. And we'll look at some other things that are a little closer. So this is a more close-up view of the same thing. So the lift is here in its parked position. It comes down horizontally to take a wheelchair or other standing person up. It travels along these rails up to the top, and once it arrives, there's an electronic sequence of operations that allows the lift to stop, allows the doors to open, allows the ramp that's in front of the lift to deploy, and allows the wheelchair user to go into the church at the first floor. In order to effectuate that, we've introduced a change to the uppermost landing, which is shown here in a darker color compared to the others. And I'll show you some illustrations that show that better. So this is the lift in its parked lower position. And this is the lift in its deployed upper position. So the lift when deployed is up here. There's a bar that stops you basically from falling off, and there's very little mass to this thing. It's mostly electronics and safety sensors. There are sensors underneath this that if something or somebody is below it, it stops. If it hits something, it stops. If it falls off the rack, it stops. You know, it's full of safety sensors. This is a photograph just because we rendered it dark to be like the color of the other railings that are there. This one on the right is just a generic photo. It shows the lift, the ramp that I referred to that deploys, goes up and down, is this guy. This version of the installation has the motor box that drives the thing up on the top landing, which we had no space for. So we're using a special detail that is available with the lift motor. If you look at these posts, they go down and they go through the floor, and it's hidden in the space below. That's what we're doing at the church. This, by the way, is the Puck building at Lafayette and Houston. And it's a very elegant installation, which will be quite like what we propose. And this is one of the illustrations that the Landmarks Commission uses in its own brochure to illustrate how to respectfully install accessibility on historic structures. So this is a floor plan. It's at the street level. It shows, in this case, the lift in the open position. And it comes around following my little hand and rides up the rail. This is a detail of the same thing. So there are these posts that are mounted into the steps. That's about as aggressive an insult we do to the building. We bolt some things through the stone treads. This is it at the upper position. And you can see how closely fitted, but well-tuned this is. So the lift arrives at the top. These doors open. The swing of the door just barely clears, but does clear. The machinery going down to the vault space. And fortunately, the remaining 2 doors have enough exit capacity when looked at according to code requirements to absorb the exit discharge from the balcony and the chapel level with room to spare. This is a section looking to the west through the stair that's in the east portico. And it shows a vault system that's below the sidewalk and below the steps. And I circled in red the landing extension that we put there, just so there's a place for the wheelchair to actually be when the doors open. And that's the only other kind of physical thing we're doing. We're removing fence, we're adding this landing, and we're automating the doors on the inside, which isn't a exterior landmark influenced thing. And just because there are water leaks, Father Mushi asked us if we could improve the waterproofing at the vault. And so a second, unrelated to the lift part of this application, is a sidewalk replacement over the vault. So it'll be a new sidewalk. Existing concrete will come out, new concrete matching color and texture of the existing and matching the jointing patterns, and new waterproofing in between the structural layer and the topping slab. These are illustrations that allow the new work to pop out. You know, we like to see it more in context because I think that's how people perceive it, but typical architecture stuff, as you highlight that which is new, and here you could see it has the new landing, which I pointed out. It has the lift folded up at the lower level, and this is the lift at the upper level. This is a detail of the step, which will be slip resistant steel. It'll be coated with either a metal sputtered finish, or it'll be a coarsened paint finish. We're not sure yet. It'll have a molding on the nosing to be similar to the stone molding that's already there. And this steel plate will fit neatly into what's called this upper threshold, which actually is called a lug threshold because it sits in under the brick and has this beautiful wash. And we're not going to destroy any of that. We're going to take this piece of steel that forms the new landing and just place it gently over some bond breaking adhesive, so we don't stain or ruin the stone left behind. That's the visual presentation of the proposed scheme. I have a bunch more details of demolition details and existing conditions photographs, but I feel that this kind of effectively communicates the thrust of what we're doing, and I'd be pleased for questions, and so we might be able to respond.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your presentation. Before we begin discussion and taking questions on this item, please be reminded of the following ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about the board business, please raise your hand through the Zoom function. The chat function should not be used to ask questions about the agenda. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand. And when a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself to speak. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. And members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subject on the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom. Jessica Elliott, I see your hand up.
Not a question, but as a fellow architect, I think this is the most elegant way you could possibly solve a problem like this. So congratulations and thank you for coming to present about it.
Thank you. We tossed out, previous architects had struggled with other things, and we struggled with a couple of things, and this is the neatest way, and I appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Andrew?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I actually only just wanted to say thank you. I went to St. Cecilia's when I was a child, and I don't go anymore. But this ramp, this wheelchair accessibility issue, has been going on since I was a child, and so. You know, if this could get done by the time I have kids, that would be fantastic. So I just wanted to express my support, and it's really funny to see this here now. I just really hope that it ends up getting solved finally.
Yeah, the church's intention is to implement this upon receiving the approvals forthwith. So unless you have a child on the way, we'll be there first.
not that I'm aware of, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. Chris, I see your hand up.
Thanks. Good evening. My name is Chris Cirillo. I'm actually presenting the next presentation, but I'm also a member of Landmark East Harlem, and so was very interested in hearing your presentation, and I agree with the previous committee members who spoke on this and said it is a very simple and elegant solution for a truly beautiful building in the community. And I just had two quick questions about is the lift controlled by whoever is coming up and needs to use it? So is it sort of always available? And if I happen to be in a wheelchair and come up, I can operate it myself, or do I need to contact someone to do that? And then my second question is just how does it work when we have a lot of snow? And is it just a matter of maintenance and keeping it clear so that it is still usable during those times of the winter when things can get a little bit messy on the sidewalk?
Sure. Well, touche on the hardest question you could possibly have posed, which is that of operating security on it. So as the proposed use of this lift is that it basically is always under supervision from somebody at the church. So that, you know, the alternative to that is that it's always available for use, and anybody coming along the street can press a button, deploy the thing, and then start taking it for rides. So obviously there needs to be security that prevents free rides. And yet, even though the church is exempt from the ADA because it's a religious institution, and so the usual accessibility standards do not apply to it, we respect that. We respect the users should not be inconvenienced to use it. So basically, there's a call station on the lower level and on the upper level inside the vestibule. There'll be a sign there and it says, call this number, and that will be in raised letters conforming to ADA standards and in Braille. And you'll have to make a phone call in order to have the lift unlocked so that it's operable by you. So once unlocked, it's operable by you, the user. There's, you know, the lift swings north of the stoop. It swings out over the sidewalk and it's rising at the time. And despite all the bells and whistles and safety, which the thing has, ultimately there's a concern that we, the architects and the church has, that somebody riding down the sidewalk in a skateboard and maybe somebody who's on the lift, who's operating themselves, might not have the ability to rotate their head. They might not see well. They could even be blind, who knows? So I think to safely operate this device across the sidewalk requires that it have supervision. So respectful that people should be able to initiate something on their own, like a call. They will need to make a call in order to have the thing unlocked, which will be electrically disabled until it's enabled by the church supervision. To the second question, just like the steps become unusable if there's a deep snowstorm, and that prevents access by people who don't need a lift to get to the church, snow shoveling of the equipment and the steps going up to it are required. It turns out there's about 24 inches of clearance between the bottom of the lift and the nearest tread. So the snow can be pretty deep and this thing still work, except you have to clear the bottom in order to gain access to it. And just as a matter of durability, the external unit of this brand, which is called Garaventa, is stainless steel with a powder coat. So we're basically dealing with a very well-made device, and it's stainless steel, so it should last longer than your child will need to use this lift.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for your questions, and Mitchell for your answers. Any further questions from the committee or from the public? If not, I know that you are seeking a letter of support for this action. And so if there is a motion, I will accept that at this moment.
Motion.
Motion by Andrew.
Second by Jessica Elliott.
Okay. Andrew, can you do roll call? I'm sorry, what was the motion, Andrew?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Motion for a letter of support.
Okay, thank you. And Jessica, you still second that, correct?
Correct. Jason also has his hand up, and I think probably to motion.
Okay.
Okay, Jessica Elliott,
Yes.
Elsie Encarnacion,
Yes.
Ivy Hume. Ivy,
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
you're welcome. Francis,
Yes. Yes.
got it. Thank you, Francis. Andrew,
Yes.
Vinny is absent, right? Jason Villanueva
Yes.
and Candy is absent. The motion passes.
Thank you, Angel and committee members. Is he gonna need to stop sharing his screen?
Yes, please. I just had one question before you go, Mitchell. When is this scheduled to go before LPC?
July 13th.
July 13th. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for your support, and we hope to be able to make this a long-lasting and well-used contribution to your community.
Mhm.
Thank you. Take care of our St. Cecilia's. We love it dearly.
Thank you. I'll sign off if that's all right.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Jason, is your hand still up from before, or do you have something?
Yeah, it was. My question was going to be to the church as to how they're going to respond to the concern relative to the wheelchair and how it's going to be used. But we already voted.
Okay. Right. And next is, well, what's next? I forgot. Las Raíces. Man, I'm getting old. Chris, are you sharing a screen or should I put my thing back up?
I think Jonathan is going to share his screen.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Jonathan. How you doing, pal?
Hey, good evening,
Hi,
everyone.
Jonathan.
Let me just share my screen. Give me a moment.
Mhm.
All right, great. Do you guys see my screen?
Yeah. Yes, we did.
Okay, great. So let's get started. So good evening, everyone. And great to be back in front of you guys again. This will be, I think, our fourth presentation to your team about our project. We're excited now that we're officially in ULURP to get the ball rolling on this development project. So I think without further ado, I'll go through our quick overview of the project and hand it over to Chris for some details on the design, and then we can get into some questions. So with that, again, I'm Jonathan Cruz with MDG Design and Construction, project manager for the development team. And MDG has partnered with Ascendant Neighborhood Development. Together, we're working with HPD to develop Las Raíces, and that is our 100% affordable housing new construction development that's located on 4 scattered sites in East Harlem. And today, again, like I mentioned previously, we're going to be giving a project overview along with some design details and updates. So as a brief overview of what Las Raíces means to us, Las Raíces is a new construction of 4 scattered sites in East Harlem. It's going to create 83 apartments of new, high quality, affordable housing, as well as 2 spaces that will be rented to community facility tenants. And the 4 sites, as we're showing on the screen, are 1761 Park Avenue. So it's Park 122nd Street, 505 East 118th Street, 338 East 117th Street, as well as 303 East 102nd Street. So currently Las Raíces is in the pre-development or pre-construction development phase, and we're going through the ULURP process, given the project sites are currently city-owned, and we're going through the disposition of city-owned property for the ULURP process. Now, as I mentioned earlier, MDG and Ascendant in partnership with HPD are developing Las Raíces. And again, just to give a quick overview of our teams, I'll hand it over to Chris Cirillo of Ascendant to give a brief overview of his team, Ascendant Neighborhood Development. Hey, Chris.
Hi everybody. Chris Cirillo, Executive Director at Ascendant Neighborhood Development. I think you all know us. I think you all know this project by now. But for anyone who's new and hasn't heard this presentation before, Ascendant is a nonprofit organization. We're based in East Harlem. Our headquarters is on 116th Street between 1st and Pleasant Avenue. We were founded in 1988, and in the last 33 years, we have developed over 800 affordable apartments in East and Central Harlem. Our portfolio currently includes just under 700 affordable rental apartments in 28 buildings. And the map on your screen shows you the locations of all of our existing buildings, highlighted with green dots. And then we have over 300 apartments in our development pipeline, including the 83 apartments in the Las Raíces project that we're presenting this evening, another 36 apartments in our Share NYC project, and close to 200 apartments proposed for a new senior housing project that we will be presenting to the board coming up as it gets a little further developed. And next slide, Jonathan. I think it's back to Jonathan to talk about MDG.
Great, thank you, Chris.
Who I should mention, we have a really long-standing working relationship with MDG. I have been at Ascendant now for almost 9 years as the executive director, and when I started, we had just engaged MDG to work with us on the rehabilitation of one of our projects. We subsequently did a much larger rehabilitation project of 21 buildings and 359 apartments in our portfolio with MDG as our development partner. So we have a really long-standing and strong relationship with MDG, and are really looking forward to moving forward on this project with them. So now I will turn it over to John.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. And just to give some background on MDG, MDG is a full-fledged affordable housing development company. We are focused strictly on affordable housing. We also do general contracting and property management. We started actually in East Harlem in the 1970s, and we have grown to have over 20,000 affordable housing units under management. And we continue to focus heavily in New York City, as Chris said, working with the Ascendant in East Harlem, but also working with the state and the city and new construction developments, but also the rehabilitation of public housing with New York City Housing Authority. And we're continuing to work on 3 projects of that nature currently. So with that, I'd like to just focus back on Las Raíces. And Las Raíces is, again, very much of what Ascendant and MDG does, and that being 100% affordable housing. So we're developing this to solve some of East Harlem's affordability crisis, as your team knows very much about. As in it says in the Manhattan's Community District Fiscal Year 2021 Statement of Community District Needs, affordable housing is identified as the most pressing issue, and as well as, based off recent housing data, about 38% of Community District 11 households are considered rent burden. So we're hoping what we're proposing continues to be a part of the solution for the affordable housing needs. So with that, I do want to reiterate that we're proposing 100% affordable housing with deep affordability. So what that means is all the apartments, all 83 apartments that will be created through the development of Las Raíces will be income restricted. I will have a chart that further details the incomes per building and the distribution of those in a moment. But I did want to just also reiterate that we are going to be adhering to mandatory inclusionary housing requirements at Park Avenue. So we will also have some of the units there be permanently affordable per HPD's guidelines. And in addition, we're also having homeless set-aside apartments for this project. Those will also be evenly distributed, and we have a proposed breakdown of where the homeless set-aside apartments will be per building that I'll show you in a moment as well. Being we are a 100% affordable housing project, we're receiving funding through the 9% low-income housing tax credit, which we'll be applying for post-ULURP certification. And that's our main source of funding, along with HPD subsidy capital funds. And in addition, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to maximize the apartment types and be as diverse as possible. So in this chart here, we're showing that we have an even distribution of the units across the apartments regarding the income bands, and try to maximize as many 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms as possible. Given the limited footprints of these buildings, we were able to achieve 22 2 bedrooms and 5 3 bedrooms across the 4 sites. So this chart I'm showing here does break down the different affordability levels. So we have from formerly homeless to 27%, 37%, 47%, 57%, and 87% AMIs, and the different unit types for each of those affordability levels and income levels, and how they're dispersed amongst the sites. And we try to be as equally distributive of these as possible amongst the 4 buildings. And I also want to discuss about our community outreach and the community preferences for the residents of this new construction property. So again, Las Raíces will have a community preference, so we're following HPD guidelines in order to have this be as many East Harlem residents as possible be the ultimate residents of this property. So we are also going to be working with a local housing ambassador. I know Ascendant and MDG have relationships with many of them. So we'll hope to be selecting one shortly, and then from there partnering with them to not only do marketing for the apartments, but also assist residents in applying for the housing lottery for Las Raíces. And one last thing I want to mention before I hand it to Chris, is our commitment to exceed the MWBE requirements as well as the local hiring and subcontracting hiring requirements. As Chris mentioned earlier, we have a long history in completing development projects in New York City specifically. So we have a lot of subcontractors that are MWBEs that we will look to work with on this project to satisfy that requirement. And we also have experience with completing Section 3 hiring specifically for the NYCHA projects that we have exceeded our requirements and really started initiatives, workforce development initiatives of providing OSHA training and weekly or bi-weekly recruitment events with our social service partners in order to not only have job opportunities available, but to make sure residents are trained and able to take advantage of them once they are available. That's something we'll also look to continue to practice here with the development of Las Raíces. And we look forward to working with the community board when it comes to that time, to working with your teams to facilitate the hiring and MWBE participation. With that, that's my general overview of the project. I'd like to hand it over to Chris Cirillo of Ascendant to talk more about the project design.
Thanks, Jonathan. And one other thing that I'll just mention related to the last slide is, we have presented the project previously initially to the executive committee. This, I think, is our third presentation to the Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee. We presented to the Housing Committee last week, and we are scheduled to present to Economic Development next week. So we'll also be coming back again specifically to meet with the Economic Development Committee next week to talk more in detail about hiring and get feedback and recommendations from that committee as well. So just wanted to mention that before we move into the design discussion. Next slide, Jonathan. So again, the basic parameters of the project haven't changed since we presented it in April. It's 83 apartments, total of about 74,000 square feet among the 4 sites. As with all HPD new construction projects, we will be complying with Enterprise Green Communities. Because 3 of the sites are within flood zones, we're working and designing those buildings to withstand flooding. So that has some impacts that we'll talk about site by site in terms of where we can locate mechanical equipment. And that has some implications for the design of those sites and facades and streetscape that we'll talk about a little bit further as we go site by site. All of the residents will have access within their buildings to laundry facilities. There'll be bike storage areas at the 2 larger buildings, which are the one on Park Avenue and the one on 118th Street. There will be accessible common rear yard areas at the 117th Street and 118th Street buildings. And the Park Avenue building will have a common roof terrace that'll be accessible for all residents at the top floor. In addition, 2 of the sites have community facility space that'll be available. So on 102nd Street, there is a small ground floor space that will be set aside for community facility use. And at the Park Avenue site, which is subject to the new East Harlem Park Avenue rezoning with requirements for non-residential uses at the lower floors, that building will have at its ground floor and 2nd floor community facility space. And you'll see that when we get to that site a little bit later in the presentation. We have not yet identified any tenants for those spaces, and we look forward to working with the community board and community residents and other organizations in the neighborhood to identify the appropriate mix of uses for those spaces. Obviously, given where we are in the process, it's going to be several years before the buildings are complete and those spaces are available. So we have some time to think about what the right mix and what the right set of tenants are for those. Next slide, Jonathan. Okay, so we're gonna just quickly run through the sites again for anyone who hasn't seen the presentation already. So the first one is located at 303 East 102nd Street. This is on the north side of 102nd Street, just east of 2nd Avenue between 2nd and 1st. It is currently fenced and is a vacant lot under HPD jurisdiction. Next slide, Jonathan. And for this site, you know, the adjacent building to the west that has frontage on 102nd Street, but mainly has its main facade fronting on 2nd Avenue is an existing 5-story walk-up tenement building. And then to the east of our site is a taller new construction building that was completed a few years ago. And so what we've proposed here is a 5-story infill building. This is one of the sites that has ground floor community facility space. This building will contain 6 apartments, including a mix of studios and 2 bedrooms. Again, laundry room, and as at all of the buildings, there will be a green roof. Here is one of the ways that we're trying to address stormwater runoff and also greening our buildings and greening our sites. Next slide, Jonathan. The second site is 338 East 117th Street. These photos are just a little bit out of date. The site had been used as a staging area for a project that was rehabilitating and expanding the former school that's at the corner of 1st Avenue and 117th Street. The site is now fenced off and is no longer being used as a staging area. So again, this is a vacant city-owned lot at the moment. It's on the south side of 117th Street, just west of 1st Avenue. Next slide. And again, this is proposed as a small infill building. We're proposing a 5-story building with a total of 7 apartments, a mix of a studio, 4 1-bedrooms and 3 2-bedrooms. Again, common laundry area, a rear yard, landscape rear yard for available for all residents to use, and a green roof. And so, you know, the context here is the older school building, which has now been converted to residential immediately to our east. This view is looking south toward the front facade of our building. And then there are a series of 5-story older walk-up tenement apartment buildings directly to the west of our site. And this is one of the sites where we're dealing with being in the floodplain. And so the space at the ground floor that you see to the right of the main entrance is mechanical space. So there is no apartment there because we needed to find space above the flood level to house mechanical equipment for the building. So it's what's there behind that wall. And I'm going to talk a little bit in general about design issues a little bit later, but we're still working on kind of the final treatment of how the ground floor of this building and a couple of the other buildings are going to be resolved. So we've made progress, I think, over the many months that we have been presenting the project and getting feedback from HPD, from the community board, from others who've seen the plans. And I think we've made quite a bit of progress, but we are continuing to work with our architects at GF55 and our landscape architects terrain to continue to refine the plans, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But next slide, Jonathan. Okay, so the third site is 505-507 East 118th Street. And this site is on the north side of 118th Street, just east of Pleasant Avenue. And this is actually a block that dead ends at the back of East River Plaza. This site is currently occupied by a portion of the Pleasant Village Community Garden. And on this slide, you can see outlined in red is the current total footprint of Pleasant Village Community Garden. The portion of the garden that is highlighted in green is the permanent garden site under the control of the Department of Parks and Recreation. And the portion in brown at the bottom right of the overhead photo that you're seeing is the development site that is under HPD jurisdiction. That's a temporary use by the garden that is the development site on 118th Street. Next slide. And so here we're proposing a 6-story building. This will be an elevator building with 18 apartments, a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. Again, a common laundry area available for residents, landscaped rear yard that will back up to the community garden that we'll talk about a little bit in a minute, and a green roof on the building. And again, the context on this street, immediately to the west of our proposed new building, is a 5-story older walk-up tenement building. And to the east of our building, immediately to the east of our building, is a vacant lot that may or may not currently be in the process of being developed. It's kind of been looking like a construction site for a while, but it doesn't seem like anything has been built there yet. And then to the east of that is a row of smaller sort of 3-story townhouse and brownstone type buildings. Next slide. This is just more of a rendering view of the new building. Again, this is one of the sites that's in a floodplain and has, by necessity, to have a ground floor mechanical room, which is the area that you see that doesn't have windows. That's immediately to the right of the main entrance. And so that is, as with the 117th Street site, one of the areas where we're continuing to work on revising and refining the plans. Next slide, excuse me. And so the next series of slides that we have are some of the preliminary conceptual designs for the rear yard at 118th Street. So this is the rear yard that abuts the Pleasant Village Community Garden. And so, you know, we're really looking forward to kind of working on refining this, working with the gardeners, working with the Department of Parks and Recreation to really figure out how the interface between our rear yard works with the community garden. You can just keep going through these, Jonathan. There's just some different views of the plantings, or an idea of what the plantings might be like. And also, we'll be thinking about different types of fencing. Obviously, we're hoping to be able to do something that is different and more unique than something like chain link fencing. So, but we're still looking at both materials and exact type of fencing. And we have to work through with the Parks Department about the details of what type of fencing, where the fencing is, if there's fencing on the park side of the property line and on ours. So there's definitely some details that we need to work on, but at least some preliminary concepts to think about how this building will interact with the community garden. Next slide. And then the fourth site is 1761 Park Avenue. And this is another site that's currently occupied temporarily by Community Garden. This is the Jackie Robinson Community Garden. And this site is located at the northeast corner of Park Avenue and East 122nd Street. So the Park Avenue side fronts on the viaduct. And then there's a large frontage along 122nd Street. And so on this site, so that last slide, just go back one, Jonathan, please. So on this site, this diagram is showing you, again, outlined in red, is the current footprint of the community garden. The brown portion on the left side is the development site. The green portion on the right is the permanent Department of Parks and Recreation jurisdiction green thumb garden, and that's the portion that will remain after the new building is constructed. Next slide. And so on this site, excuse me, on this site, we are proposing a 14-story building, taking advantage of the rezoning that happened along Park Avenue, and proposing our largest building of the four with 52 apartments, a mix of studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, an elevator building. This is the second site that has community facility space. And as I noted earlier, it has community facility space at both the ground floor and the second floor, with the potential for entrances off of both 122nd Street and Park Avenue. So there are possibilities for the space to be divided. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one larger tenant that takes the whole space. It could potentially be smaller tenants that take portions of the space. The laundry room here is up on the top floor, and it opens out onto the public roof terrace that the resident roof terrace at the top floor. Next slide. And so this is looking at the rendering from 122nd Street. So at the far right is the location of the residential. Ooh, back one, please. Thanks. Is the residential entryway, which is adjacent to Jackie Robinson Community Garden. And then the community facility entrances will be away from the garden entrance and closer toward Park Avenue, or actually on Park Avenue. Okay, next slide. And one of the things that we've mentioned in our previous presentations is that we recognize, certainly on the buildings where we have ground floor mechanical spaces, that we have some blank walls. And so, we are still thinking through different options for addressing those spaces. So what you're seeing on the ground floor is not necessarily the final design. So I just want to emphasize that we are continuing to look at a variety of different options, and we'll continue to come back to the community board, even, after ULURP, with updates about where we are and seeking feedback, because I think we've gotten a lot of helpful comments so far that have helped us to improve the plans for all of the sites. And I think we recognize that we still have more work to do, and we are doing that work, and welcome additional comments tonight and in the future. So we at Ascendant are launching a public art initiative in our portfolio, not just for the Las Raíces project, but looking across our entire portfolio of 28 existing buildings and 6 proposed new buildings in our pipeline. And identifying locations where we can incorporate public art. And so a couple of the places that we have spoken about in the past when talking about the Las Raíces project are some of those ground floor spaces at 118th Street, 117th Street, where we could potentially do either public art or work with our landscape architects to create more of a green or landscape treatment for those wall spaces. And then along Park Avenue at the taller building, where we have a very visible building, both visible in the neighborhood at the pedestrian scale, but also visible if you're riding on the Metro North tracks. And so thinking about possibilities for maybe something larger scale on the Park Avenue facade. So we're showing here, highlighted in yellow, some of the areas that we're thinking about and exploring for potential public art installations. Next slide. Okay, so that's the end of the formal presentation. Obviously, we're, since the last time we were before the committee back in April, the project has been certified. So we're now officially into the ULURP process after many, many years of working on this project and getting to this point. So we're really excited to be moving forward. We obviously welcome continued feedback. As I mentioned, we were before the Housing Committee last week and got some great feedback and comments. We've been before this committee. This is our 3rd time, and have always been, I think, you all have been really forthright and thoughtful in your comments about it, and so we really appreciate that. Another thing that has happened since the last time we presented to you is in mid-May, we were able to finally sit down with both community garden groups separately. So we met with the Pleasant Village Community Gardeners, with the Department of Parks and Recreation and HPD, and then later that week also with the Jackie Robinson Gardeners with HPD and Parks. And so, have been able to start a dialogue with both garden groups about the gardens, about the impacts that will happen during the construction period, about ways that we can work with the gardeners long-term in terms of relocating anything that needs to be relocated from the portions of the sites that are being developed to the portions that are not, things that we can do as the development team, as neighbors, as partners to help to strengthen the community gardens going forward. So we're looking forward to continuing those conversations throughout this process and throughout the next many years that it will take to get to completing these buildings. But we're really excited that that has finally started. And I think, it was a positive conversation with both. We got a lot of questions and a lot of feedback and a lot of comments from the gardeners. We're in the process of kind of assessing all of that and thinking through how we can respond to each of those requests or comments. And we'll be continuing to follow up with the gardeners going forward. So I just wanted to make sure that we noted that as well. And I think that's everything. So I'll stop there. And yeah, we're here to take questions.
Thanks, Chris. Just as a reminder, this is essentially the public hearing, so we are here for questions, comments, feedback, and we'll be taking that from not only committee members, but also the public. I did have one question. I know that Angel and I reached out to the department, DHS, Department of Homeless Services, in regards to a question about the process by which those applicants are chosen. I know they're not here, but I did want to see if I can at least pose the question, because I know that one of the concerns is that we get people who are formerly homeless coming from the East Harlem community, but I don't know how that process really works. So if anybody can speak to that, and if not, we'll save that for DHS.
I do not know the answer to that, but
I know.
I'm happy to, I'm happy to follow
I know
up.
that
It's a question that has been raised previously related to this project, which has units set aside for people who are exiting the shelter system, and obviously, completely appropriate concern about units being built in the community, serving people in the community who are dealing with homelessness. So. But we will definitely, work with HPD and DHS to get the specific answer to that. Unless Vianda knows, I don't know if Vianda knows the answer to that. If not, we'll definitely work on getting the specific answer to that because I think it's a really important one and one that we all need to.
Right. I don't know the details, and when they come back before you, we'll definitely have the answers.
Thank you. I saw Jessica Elliott's hand and then Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again for coming to present on this incredible project. I just had two quick questions. One, the elevation of the 505 East 118. There's the mechanical door at the bottom right-hand side of that image. I'm just wondering, is there no way to align that with the windows above? I know we talked about this last time, but is it just impossible?
I don't know if that specific question has come up. I apologize if you asked it and we didn't look into an answer. So I think what's happening on the ground floor there, and I don't have a plan in front of me, but so at the far western side of that building is the residential entrance. Then we have the mechanical room for some of the mechanical equipment that has to be at the ground floor. Then we have a studio apartment, which is those two windows that front onto the street. And then an egress, it's an egress door to an egress stair that's coming out at the far eastern side of the building there. So, I mean, we can definitely look at it. Obviously, I kind of get crazy about symmetry things too. So I think it's definitely worth looking at whether there's any way to do that. I think the issue may be just that we're trying to not eat into what is already a studio apartment. But we will look at that and definitely get you an answer one way or another about.
Got it. Thank you so much. And then thank you for letting us know that you talked to both community gardens. I think that's so important. I know we also talked last time about sun studies. I know there's these renderings and it shows the sun still hitting the community gardens in the back. And I just, I know that's probably not the case. I know it's probably incredibly unavoidable, but would be good to understand and wondering if you talked with them about that at all.
Yeah, I mean, we talked in general terms. So, I mean, the other thing that happened once we were certified is the environmental impact statement, draft environmental impact statement was released concurrent with the certification. So all the details about any incremental shadows on either of the two sites is now there. It's available on City Planning's website. I'm not sure if it's also on HPD's website, but it's definitely on City Planning's website for the project. So the details are there. Yes, the renderings are not completely probably accurate in terms of showing the sunlight, but we did talk to the gardeners about that somewhat. There's definitely a concern that was expressed by the gardeners from the Jackie Robinson Garden because that is a narrow site and there's an existing 5-story walk-up building right at the street line to the east, and then our building. And as much as we've kind of tried to move the massing as far toward Park Avenue as we can, and then carved out as much of a angle as we can, there definitely are still impacts that are going to happen to the garden. And so one of the questions that the gardeners asked that we're currently looking into is about lighting. And, I think one of the other things we need to think about is, exactly like material colors and other things to create reflectivity. So, the brick colors that we're showing right now are still sort of a placeholder. I don't think we're completely, 100% happy with the way that building is kind of currently showing in terms of color. So, and I think as we think more, and now that we're in conversation with the gardeners, thinking about what are the best ways, and luckily we have great landscape architects on our team, like what are the best ways that we can make the gardens, as bright and light filled as possible, given the constraints that we have about the massing and just kind of zoning and other requirements, is definitely something that we're trying to think through as well. And it's partly why everything isn't completely finalized at the moment, because we want to be still open to looking at ways that we can try to address those concerns. So we'll definitely keep you apprised on that, because it's something that we're really committed to,
Great.
finding the best solution to.
Andrew, then Ivy.
Thank you for the presentation. Apologies if this is something that was already covered at last month's meeting. I was unable to make it due to a death in the family. There's 2 questions regarding the gardens. The first, you mentioned the footprint and showed us the footprint of both developments on the garden. So it's the physical footprint of the building that would be going on top of the garden. But do you yet know how much of both gardens overall will be impacted during construction? I know we mentioned light, but also the dust and debris, noise, and runoff from construction. Do you have did you express something clearly to the gardeners as to what the overall impact outside of that footprint would be? And then just one short follow-up to that.
Sure. So yes, that did come up in both of those conversations. And, it's, we're still a little ways away from knowing exactly the specifics of the construction staging for each site. So as it relates to Pleasant Village Community Garden, the majority of the garden remains, and given the configuration of where the development site is and where the building footprint is, much closer to 118th Street with, a backyard space that separates the building site itself from the remainder of the garden. I think the impacts there will be less. It'll be less impactful on the garden during construction, although obviously there will have to be appropriate security measures so that people are safe if they're in the garden and gardening during the construction period. I think we were really upfront and honest with the Jackie Robinson gardeners that given the configuration of that site and how narrow the site is and how tall that building is, that it's really unlikely that for the growing seasons during the construction period that they will be able to have access to that site at all, which I know was not something that they wanted to hear. But I think we needed to be really upfront about the fact that building a 14-story building adjacent to a very narrow lot is not likely to leave much space, if any, for people to safely be on site, just from a safety perspective, but also realistically with scaffolding and sidewalk bridges. The lighting impacts are likely to be more significant during the construction period than the long-term impacts will be of the building itself. So we did have that conversation with them. I think given where we are in the process, we didn't kind of completely go through the timeline, but now that we're certified and into the ULURP process, we expect to be completing ULURP by the fall. So this summer growing season, obviously the gardeners continue to have access throughout this season, depending on completion of ULURP and then how quickly all the the financing comes into place. It's possible that we could be ready to start construction at some point in 2022. That would be our goal. Obviously, this project has been around for a long time, many, many years. So we'd like it to move as quickly as possible once ULURP is completed. So it's possible that starting next season, there will start to be construction impacts, and those will definitely be more substantial at Jackie Robinson than at Pleasant Village. But yeah, that was definitely part of our discussions with them, and will continue to be part of our discussions with them.
And then just the follow-up, since this is a project that's been in the works for a while, what compensation or replacement has been proposed at this point from your team for the loss of access to either one or both of those gardens during the process of construction?
Well, you know, so since we just had our first meetings with them, I mean, we haven't gotten to that discussion yet. I mean, I think obviously we recognize there's going to have to be some accommodation for the gardeners, but it was really, this was our first opportunity as the development team to hear from the gardeners, to hear about what is happening on those portions of the sites that are going to be developed, what people would like to see relocated, you know, what permanent improvements people might like to see in the gardens once construction is complete on the development project. So I think, you know, we're still in the early stages of that, but I do anticipate that we will, you know, figure out a way to work with both gardeners, you know, to address as many of the concerns that they have raised and the requests that they have made as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Ivy?
Yeah, hi, Chris and everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for giving us a presentation again today. I'm happy I've had the chance to see it a handful of times, and it really seems like every time you're really responding to some of the more critical comments, and it shows. I think one thing that came to mind just now when you're talking about the gardens and the spaces, I think lighting is really critical, and we've commented on that a few times, but I just want to hammer it home one more time. The other day we were talking on the transportation committee about lighting in regards to the nearby Park Avenue viaduct. Chris, I think you were on that meeting too. And I think particularly like with the community gardens, I don't know if other people feel this way, but I think like they are really poorly, I mean, they're used for daytime use, and they're kind of created with a sort of ad hoc, like the users are the ones that kind of make the gardens, and it's kind of, yeah, ad hoc and like impromptu in that way. But if lighting could be provided that made these spaces feel safe at night to walk past, particularly on like the 122nd Street site, because that's a really sketchy, it's in our sketchiest part of town, I'd say. So.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think where we are in terms of the design, just to say, you know, the massing, unit counts, unit types, height, you know, those are the things that are pretty much set, but we're still very much, I think, working on, you know, the right mix of color, the right mix of materials. Obviously, they're mostly going to be masonry buildings, but how exactly that looks, brick colors, finishes, other kind of detail work, and definitely lighting, you know, obviously with both our residential entry at 122nd Street immediately adjacent to the garden. We want that to be a light-filled space. You know, the gardeners there asked about whether we could have a security camera aimed at the garden as well. And, you know, and that's definitely something that will have security for our building. It's probably not out of the realm of feasibility to have a camera that's focused on the garden as well, to add an extra layer of security. The other thing in the renderings and the elevations that we showed, obviously, we're trying to show the buildings. Most of the sites either have existing street tree pits or street trees, or will have them as per DOT requirements and parks requirements. So, you know, the streetscape will look a little bit different than what's kind of currently shown on the plans as well. I know that's another question that had come up. So definitely, you know, lighting, landscaping. We had a meeting just earlier this week with our architect and our landscape architect to kind of move to the next stage of thinking about the landscaping. We haven't really refined the plans for the planters yet at 118th Street, which is set back so that we can accommodate a ramp to get up to the first floor elevation, which is elevated because of the floodplain. So there's definitely a bunch of things that we're still working on that will, I think, you'll see as we bring back the plans further refined in coming weeks. See hopefully additional improvements.
Thank you. We now have Beverly and then Warren, and then we're gonna wrap this up so we can continue on with the agenda. Beverly, are you able to unmute?
Unmute. Hello?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Good evening to the committee staff and chair and the presenters. Great presentation. Thank you for coming. I have some questions regarding this project. About 3 of them. The first one is, I guess, made to Ascendant. Are all your properties that you have from your listing, did you get from HPD building stock? The next question is regarding 338 East 17th Street. I know that it's in the flood area. Is the basement going to be used for anything at all, or it's just going to be sealed up? And the third one is, you have 4 locations. Will the construction be all at the same time? Thank you.
Okay. All right. So our existing portfolio consists of 28 buildings. Of those buildings, 20, let's see, let me do it this way. 5 of them are newly constructed, and they were constructed on formerly city-owned sites that we acquired from HPD that went through ULURP. They're all, the newest one opened in 2009. Prior to that, 2 of them opened in 2003, and 1 opened back in 1997. So those are now a little bit older. And then the remainder of our buildings are older, mostly walk-up buildings ranging from 4 stories and 4 units to 5 or 6 stories. Those were all acquired from HPD through various disposition programs and rehabilitated in the 1990s over the course of about 7 different projects that we did with HPD under various different HPD rehab programs. And then we recently, with HPD and HDC, rehabilitated all of those buildings, did a new round of rehabilitation, extended the affordability of all of those buildings, and that project completed last year. 2 of our older rehab buildings we actually acquired from the Resolution Trust Corporation because they had been foreclosed on during the savings and loan crisis in the early 1990s. But those were financed ultimately with HPD rehab funding. So yeah, so most of our properties have come through HPD. Your second question was about if there is a basement at the 117th Street building, and Jonathan may have to help me with that question. I believe that there isn't.
Yes, Chris.
There isn't.
So there is no basement there.
There is no basement at 117th, and there isn't at 118th either because of the floodplain, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, yes, so those 2 sites, 117th Street and 118th Street, do not have basements. So the ground floor is the first floor of each of those buildings. And then your third question, I knew I'd forget the third one by the time I got to it. The third one was?
Construction at the same time.
Construction at the same time. Yes. Yes, ideally, we would want to be constructing all 4 of the buildings at the same time. There will be it's one project, it'll be one financing, it'll be one construction loan closing. So we'll have obligations to HPD and to our tax credit investors to complete the project within one construction period. So that will mean that we'll be working on all 4 sites at the same time. So obviously the logistics of an 83 unit project that has 4 separate sites that are scattered around the neighborhood is more complicated than if we were building one building that had 83 units in one place.
That's true.
But you know, MDG is has a lot of experience in this. Our rehab project, we rehabbed 21 buildings that are scattered all over the neighborhood, and we're working in all of them at the same time. So it can be done. It just takes more coordination. So yeah, so the plan would be that they would all be in construction at the same time.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you, Beverly and Chris. Warren?
Hello, good evening. I had a question regarding all the setbacks for all the buildings, because it seems that you're pushing all the massing of the buildings and creating more jiggle jaggles instead of retaining and keeping the street walls consistent. On Park Avenue, set back from Park Avenue, zoning wise, that's unnecessary, and you can give more room towards the garden. If you make the building flush on Park Avenue, that's one big one, because I think the gardens deserve more space. And then the other setbacks in the other buildings, which is accommodating the ramp, I think also those are unnecessary setbacks, and you can give more room to the gardens in the back if you shift the building forward and only keep the ramp, and the entrance is simply set into and the overhang of the building above with an open arcade below. So you preserve the street wall, you make the buildings more consistent and flush with the other side adjacent buildings, and you give more space to the gardens and the open space. But you said that massing is now set, and I find that hard to believe. Could you comment on that?
Sure. So it depends a little bit by site. So 102nd Street is at the street wall. So we'll leave 303 102nd Street out of that conversation because it's not set back. At 117th Street, the building is set back a bit to accommodate the ramp. So that is one place where we are setting back a bit. I am not sure, and I'm sorry we don't have our architect in the meeting this evening, but I'm not sure that we can actually get the full ramp in that we need and still have the building, up above it. I mean, we could certainly, look at that, but we've kind of been working on these sites for probably close to 2 years now, looking at all the different options, and, it would be our, first intent to hold a street wall if that's possible. But, the accommodating the floodplains and the setbacks and the ramps definitely creates some challenges on these different sites. Regarding 118th Street, the building is set back from the street wall. If you look at the building directly to the west, which is the other 5-story, the 5-story tenement building existing on that street, but the other buildings to the east of our building are set back, actually, I believe even further than our building is. So there isn't one consistent street wall on that street. And the location of that building in relation to the street wall line and the property line really doesn't impact the boundary of the garden, because the footprint of the development site is the portion of the site that was shown in on the slide that we had that's shaded in brown, which was the portion that was only for temporary garden use. So it is the size that it is. So moving the building, further south toward the street wall line would not change the amount of space. It would make our backyard bigger, but it wouldn't make the garden bigger. And as regards to Park Avenue, yes, we've pushed the massing toward Park Avenue, and we've carved back the shape of the building to maximize the light that's going in. The setback there is an option under the zoning that was put in place under the East Harlem rezoning, and specifically for the Park Avenue corridor. There was an allowance made for new buildings that would be built under that zoning to set back. And the reasoning and the rationale for that came out of the neighborhood planning process and the desire to see potentially new buildings set back to create more space for pedestrians so that it didn't seem like buildings were right flush up against the viaduct. So it's partly to get more light and air down to Park Avenue. So on that very small and complicated site with a garden on one side and an elevated viaduct on the other, I think we've tried to strike the right balance. And again, I'll note on that site, the permanent garden site is set. We don't control that. So we're building on the development site that HPD has available that they have offered to us. And we've done our best, we think, with massing the building and responding to zoning and being responsive to light and air requirements for both the garden and also for pedestrians on Park Avenue. Ours is one of, will likely be one of the first of many tall new buildings there, which will definitely change the context and the feel of Park Avenue. And I think will, there is a concern that with a lot of tall buildings there and the viaduct, that it will be even darker. And so, new buildings taking advantage of that opportunity to set back a bit is actually, we believe for this site, an important feature and important accommodation for pedestrian experience along Park Avenue.
Yeah, thank you. I respectfully disagree with what the architects are advising you. I think that imaginative architects would have figured out how to retain street walls and make a much more consistent, contextual designs for the massing. Some of these things are optional, and I think giving more space, not just enlarging your backyard is one thing, but it also benefits because it gives more space to the gardens all around in open space in East Harlem. All these buildings are contributing to the continued erosion of the street walls, erosion of the urban context, and I think that that's detrimental in the long term. Maybe for your next round of buildings, you hire imaginative architects. You also should look into Latino architects because it's in a city like New York, you have Puerto Rican architects, Dominican architects, and this is your home as well. And I think that that should be reflected in all these projects you're proposing. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you. Again, this is a, we will be voting on this in July, on our July meeting, as per the timeline for ULURP. So any other questions we will take into account and send them your way in preparation for that, and any other plans that come up from now to then, please make sure to send them our way so that we can review them before the vote. With that, I think we can let you go now. We do have one last agenda item, which I would like to get to. Miss Angel.
Thank you, Elsie.
Angel, there you go. Thank you,
to all the
Chris.
committee members.
Yeah, of course, we appreciate you always coming and giving us a full array of information.
Before you go, Chris, like it was mentioned a couple of times that how many times the presentation has come and how many committees you have come. This has been an ask of community boards as part of the land use review process to get an opportunity to have conversations with developers and with the sponsoring agencies before something gets certified. So to seeing it now in action is something that I think we at the community board and members of the public need to take note of. And just see that one, it is certainly possible, and this is what it looks like, right? And and be appreciative of partners such as Ascendant and the other developers that have come through that have been willing to come time and again to explain this project, to listen, to adjust, so that it is a a constructive conversation, and it's a dialogue versus just hearing something at the last second and then being expected to vote on it, which has been, which was for a long time the experience, right? So this is quite good. So thank you for that, Chris. I just wanted to say that before you jumped off.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And, we are always willing to come, whatever committees want to hear us, we're happy to come and be on the agenda, so. Thank
you, Chris. And also to HPD, we've been driving each other crazy trying to get schedules coordinated. So, thank you both. Thank you guys also. Yeah, so okay, so moving on to do the Elevate Transit Zoning for Accessibility text amendment, I believe Jose is still on. Jose from DCP is still on in case members of the committee or the public have any questions. We did not ask them to come and make a presentation. This has been presented already. Also, we had our land use consultant speak to this last month and present a memo, which I shared again this afternoon. I did want to note for the committee members, something that I don't typically do, and actually I think it's bad practice, is sending a resolution at the last second. I think it's unfair. It was not my intention. But since we had something drafted and we hadn't received anything before, we just wanted to share it to spare a conversation. Y'all can vote on that. You can do something completely different. The point at committee really is not so much to come out with a finalized resolution. The point is just to say your yay, your nay, and whys. We can always, draft the document, the resolution afterwards, so long as it's presented to the full board, which is taking the final vote, on the 15th. But I just wanted to note that before you all engage in the conversation. I really rail against things being sent at the last minute. I think it's unfair. So, if it's, unfair for the goose, it's unfair for the gander. So I wanted to kind of put myself out there as I'm the one that sent it and I shouldn't have sent it so late. But anyway, it does make a couple of, it does list out a couple of, key points from the proposal, I thought. And then the therefore part is all my writing. Feel free to chop that up. I've worked collaboratively my entire life. I have no pride of authorship at all. Chop that up and do what you will with it. I did think, though, however, that it was important to make the point about the work that was done most recently as part of the neighborhood plan and the rezoning as it relates to easements. I also thought it was important to be consistent on the mandatory inclusionary housing, where we've been making the point about the inclusion of affordable housing in all these projects. Land where you may on, how affordable or not it is, but that it is affordable at all is something that has been a basic tenet of the community board for a while. I thought it was important to make that point. I don't know if it was clear to everyone, but it's at least, or at least it's my understanding. Jose, please correct me if I'm wrong on this. From my reading, it seems that the additional floor area being, offered as part of this text amendment would not be subject to MIH, right? So a building could be subject to MIH and the floor area under normal circumstances would be part of the calculus for determining how many units, but the additional bonus that would come as part of the elevate would not. So I thought it was important to include that, just to kind of stir the pot, see where you guys fell on it. And what was the last thing? And then also, this is me just sharing my opinions. The point about the bonus being exclusively for accessibility improvements, not the rest of the improvements. My opinion, for whatever it's worth, is that it was presented initially as an accessibility project with an accessibility goal, and that any bonuses that come from that program, given that the MTA already has this obligation to provide accessibility, should only be focused on accessibility. That's all I have to say on that. I can present the memo that George prepared for us if you'd like, or I could throw up the reso, or however you'd like to proceed.
Thank you for that, Angel. You've taken a lot of things right out of my brain, but I did see Jason's hands up.
I'm sorry, Elsie. That last piece he said, I couldn't hear it.
Okay, can you repeat that, Angel? The last
about
part?
about the accessibility, Jason?
Please.
Yes.
Sure. So yeah, my last thought was that the bonus is offered to projects like for accessibility, but also for other types of projects. And my thought is that it should only be for accessibility projects. For example, paying for an elevator to be at a station versus, some beautification or any other kind of, I'm sorry, hold on.
Got it. Thank you, Angel.
Sorry, my kid's calling. That was just my thought. It was presented initially as a plan to fund these accessibility projects. And I think that it should be focused on that. But that's just my opinion.
Yes, Andrew.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for picking up on those, especially since I wasn't here last meeting. I appreciate you highlighting that for us. That's really important. Thank you.
Sure thing, Andrew. Elsie, I'm very sorry. I need to be excused just for 1 minute.
No. Sure, go
Elsie,
ahead.
so my hand was raised. My only thought, and a lot of this comes from the rigorous borough president trainings that we take as chairs, and it's just getting that resolution down to a page. I love a lot of the points that are there. I just think it's something that, if as a committee, maybe we need to do a little bit of work on what we really want to emphasize the whereases, so then that way for our resolution, that's also emphasized as well, so it doesn't get lost in source. I know it's a big challenge trying to do that on the floor in an evening, but I'm definitely willing to assist to draft it, to assist you and Angel or whoever.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. I mean, at some point I might be asked to read it. And so I would love for it to be just 1 page or less. So that's great, because I remember what happened to Jessica Elliott that one time. It was a lot during a meeting. So I agree. And I also agree
just
that
been told
to
by
be
the
succinct,
electeds. Sorry.
no, but yeah,
Sorry.
also to be succinct and to make sure that we're making a point. And so the resolution is really just a draft. It's really just a point. We don't even have to present the resolution or vote on the resolution. We can just say, as Angel mentioned, yay, nay, and then have some opinion about what we want to add to that and information that we want to give to the full board. I think some of the points that Angel brought up were extremely important in that resolution, but also what he just spoke in terms of the MIH, in terms of the bonuses for beautification, and what that means and what that could mean to our community in terms of height, and also the work that had already been done during the rezoning in 2017, and how that might kind of put all that work to the side. And that work was very hard and long, and a lot of people put a lot of effort into that. So I did see, I don't know, Andrew, if your hand was still raised from before.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was from before. I'll lower
Don't be sorry. No worries. But Jessica, I did see your hand up for a quick second. Did I make that
I
up?
don't think it was, but thank you to Angel and everyone else who contributed to the drafting of that resolution. I thought it was really effective, but yeah, a little lengthy. So, but thank you.
Okay, so we can start by putting that up if you like, Angel, and kind of digging into it and taking out what we don't see. What we don't see necessary, and keeping what we do. I am actually going to have to be excused for 2 seconds. So I will excuse myself for 2 seconds. Angel, you should just take over that conversation piece, but I'll be 2 seconds.
Okay, you guys seeing the reso? Just going to increase the size.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, let me get rid of my own face. I know what I look like. Okay. So she asked me to run through this, right? So yeah, so like Elsie was saying, and I said before, yes, it is lengthy, and like the idea here is just we pretty much just captured all the ideas that came to mind, and to be able to work down from here. So certainly getting this down to a page, or at the very least half, is certainly something we should do. I like to think of like crafting the resos the other way around. I have to think of like, what is it like, I may spitball like what my ideas are, but what does it lead me to? Is it leading me to a yes, to a no, and then why? And then go back and fill in the whereases. So if I'm saying, I like this kind of car, I like it because it has this kind of wheels, I like it because it has these kinds of windows, and then I go back and I fill in the whereases. So thinking about it that way, like where, what in the whereases are the key points that we want to highlight and the therefore. and then for you all to decide is, what are you thinking in terms of what you want to say in response to the proposal? Are you in favor? Are you against? Is the basic question. But then, we should never just submit a yes or a no. We should always explain why. And then, we can explain why. And then that'll be captured in the therefore. So it doesn't have to be super lengthy, but, it just has to make the points that you all feel are the most important to make in response to what has been proposed. If you want me to read through each of these, I'm happy to do it. I can do that fast, and you can slow me down. So the first one, whereas the Metropolitan Transportation Authority has made extremely slow progress in making transit stations accessible, whereas the New York City zoning resolution presently allows for transit improvement floor area bonuses, but only in the central business districts, and within central business districts, limited sites are eligible, whereas the floor area bonuses that are currently in place for transit improvements have not been highly utilized, whereas the Department of City Planning has built on work conducted by the City Council, and together with its co-applicant, the MTA, are proposing amendments to the New York City zoning resolution that would greatly expand areas that qualify for the transit improvement bonuses. I think that one's important. Whereas while improvements to address accessibility will be prioritized, improvements to transit stations can include items unrelated to accessibility. I think that's a key point. Whereas all current and planned transit stations in Community District 11 would qualify to receive improvements facilitated through floor area bonuses given to nearby developments, regardless of the current status of their accessibility. I think on that one, it's key to remember that the Second Avenue subway is coming, and that's going to have it anyway. They already have to pay for that. So what we're talking about is Lexington Avenue and 125th and Metro North. Whereas the vast majority of transit stations in Manhattan will be eligible to receive a bonus, yet other than downtown Brooklyn, only a few stations outside of Manhattan are eligible to receive a bonus. This is showing sisterhood, brotherhood with other districts. Whereas the geographic bias for eligible stations is due to the existing zoning around transit stations because the zoning must be R9 or R10 equivalent to qualify for an improvement made via a transit improvement bonus. Whereas such high density zoning is rare outside of Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn, which means that those stations that need accessibility in the system will have no bonus mechanism which means that most stations that need accessibility in the system will have no bonus mechanism in place to provide such improvements. Whereas this geographic bias brings into question issues of equity, as people who live in the outer boroughs also have a need of stations that are accessible, but this text amendment does little for them other than freeing MTA capital monies that would have been spent improving stations in Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn. Disregard the strike through. Whereas another mechanism to improve accessibility to transit stations, which could be applied evenly across the city where costs and benefits are felt evenly, would use our existing tax system. Whereas the authorization for a bonus not only increases the base FAR by up to 20%, but also allows for increases in height up to 25%. Whereas the 500-foot qualification for a bonus is measured from any point of a transit station to any part of a zoning lot with a development site, which means developers can design zoning lots so that they qualify for the bonus, even though the development is further than 500 feet from the station. We've certainly seen creative uses and abuses of the zoning text and the configuration of zoning lots to abuse the current system. So that's a key point. Whereas, not so much in our district, but in other districts for sure. Whereas a special permit is available for projects that use the bonus that also want to modify the bulk regulations more than 25% height increase, more than the 25% height increase available through authorization. Whereas such flexibility in height, setback, and qualification for the bonus introduces unpredictability, where zoning should bring predictable building forms, whereas a transit improvement bonus does not trigger mandatory inclusionary housing, nor does the bonus provide any additional MIH units in areas already designated as mandatory inclusionary housing areas. Whereas most of the areas affected by the transit improvement bonus in East Harlem were just rezoned to higher densities in 2017 to trigger MIH and have bulk regulations that were subject, that's poorly written, that were subject to extensive negotiation, which can be easily waived through a transit improvement authorization should the zoning proposal pass without amendment.
I think you just need an of there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll fix that. I'll come back to it. Where did I leave off? Transit building forms, MIH amendment. Whereas the transit bonus appears to be a way to address a real need to the transit system paying for these improvements by providing developers additional floor area, even though the MTA has a legal obligation under federal law to provide access to their stations. Whereas each authorization for a transit improvement bonus will be required to have an environmental review, but these reviews will be done on a project-by-project basis, most of which will not meet the threshold individually to have significant environmental impacts, but together would likely have significant environmental impacts. Whereas the proposed transit improvement bonus has the potential to add well over 1 million square feet of additional floor area to development sites in Community District 11, but since the impact of these additional units will be assessed project by project, the significance of the environmental impacts will certainly be understated. Whereas by understating the environmental impact of the proposal, the larger East Harlem community will pay for unmitigated environmental impacts with the diminishment of quality of life, while the MTA, which is legally obligated to provide accessible stations regardless of the existence of a transit improvement bonus, will benefit by having improvements made to their stations at no cost to them. Tisk, tisk. Whereas breaking up a discretionary action into small parts for the purpose of environmental review is known as segmentation, which is normally illegal, but the transit improvement bonus appears to have been specifically designed to avoid such claim, even though the growth it brings is likely to have significant environmental impacts that will not be mitigated. Sorry. Whereas the proposed zoning text amendment also allows for zoning relief for easements, whereas the Special East Harlem Corridors District was adopted in 2017, already has zoning relief for easements built into the area around the 2nd Avenue subway stations, whereas the proposed text amendment does not change this part of the Special East Harlem Corridor District, which allows applicants to receive zoning relief from both the Special East Harlem Corridor District and from the proposed text amendment. And whereas the Special East Harlem Corridor Special District should be amended to remove the easement relief provided there, now therefore, and then the rest of what I explained.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not reading all of that. So we should start. We could scroll up and we can remove. I think we should really focus on what it is that we are trying to, where our position really falls, and highlight those. I know that Angel already kind of highlighted some as he was speaking, but Jessica, I see that your hand went up. So if you can.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I personally think that almost all of these are incredibly important points that should not be removed. I think there's the first whereas that mentions Brooklyn. That's an unnecessary one potentially. It was on the first page. And then there was the one that said, whereas the transit bonus appears. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me also, but oh no, an angel. Let's see, that one, 34.
Angel, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying you'll thank me in a second once I'm finished.
Okay.
Should have done this before. Okay. So the Brooklyn one was 30 something.
I think, well, yeah, 34 and 10, I think, are the two that I think could be removed, but I think that all the others are important, unfortunately.
So it's not 34 anymore, it's something else. So Brooklyn. So 10.
Oh, no, oh, yes, wait. Yeah,
Okay, what else?
yeah, great work. This is incredible and very helpful.
Okay. Is anyone else just anywhere? Should I scroll downward very slowly, see if folks, it refreshes folks' memories and like what they want to see changed or amended? Hearing none, I'm going to do that.
Sorry, I meant 7 instead of 10.
So
But
not 10, only 7, or 7 and 10?
Maybe 7 and 10, if anyone else has an opinion.
Okay.
What was, sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but I guess that's okay. What is the reason for number 7? Or like the backstory? Just want to understand the intent.
Yeah, so it's pointing out how the need is so heavy in other areas, but there isn't a mechanism that would benefit them directly.
Can you scroll up to 4 and 3?
Certainly.
Would it be useful to cite what the amendments are, or I'm just wondering about the amendments to the zoning resolution. And I guess
Sorry.
this is a question for everyone, like, would it be useful to understand more about them?
What the sections that are being amended, you mean?
Yeah, the sections that are being amended and like, what are they, I guess, qualitatively? It says it expands areas, but I'm wondering how and if we need to even acknowledge that in this context.
It's for me for later. Anything else, guys? Oh, folks? I'm going to stop my descent again, and then you can stop me. This is why I do not like doing resos at meetings. It's brutal.
Like, there are two that seem kind of similar to me if you scroll down.
Which number, Ivy?
I'm just looking at the Word document that you sent, so I don't,
Okay.
it doesn't have a number next to it, but if you scroll down, of no bonus. Wait, actually, sorry, scroll up. Maybe it was here, and I just. Nothing. Yeah, in the version you emailed, you have a clause. It's whereas this geographic bias brings into question issues of equity, as people who live in the outer boroughs also have need of stations that are accessible, but this text memo does little for them other than freeing MTA capital monies. Is that here?
Yeah, it's the same document. I just threw it on a different place to play with it.
Okay, yeah, because that in the version that you sent out, that seemed really similar to the clause immediately above it. And I wonder if we can consolidate. Yeah, basically the first one you're talking about, okay, density zoning is we're outside Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn, ... And then the next one is geographic bias brings into question issues of equity. I think you can combine those two sentiments. Like it's the same sentiment, if that makes sense.
So 7 and 8 on the screen.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we could keep 8 if we remove 7. Do you agree?
I do.
Okay.
All right.
Well, maybe it is, I would add, if we can, I like that you're specific about the boroughs. I mean, I'm thinking, for example, about the Bronx, where most stations are elevated, or a lot of them. And so I think just to capture that there's like an inherent bias toward Manhattan and like downtown Manhattan versus outer boroughs.
So keep 7.
I think she's saying add some of that language into 8.
Yeah.
Combine 7 and 8.
Yeah, I just think it's nice to capture the essence of like the outer boroughs relationship to the zoning text amendment, to accessibility versus, you know, downtown Manhattan. And arguably it's easier to put an elevator in, you know, at Woodlawn because it's elevated and you have space, versus Wall Street where you're super underground and it's like an infrastructural nightmare to install an elevator. However, that doesn't mean that we should not put any elevators in or make any of these outer borough stations inaccessible. I think we need a more equitable system. So just capturing that in a discussion, citing the boroughs. Or like the 7 train, like I'm thinking about a lot of these trains that are elevated. Yeah.
I gotcha. All right.
We can continue work on the whereases and we can send Angel stuff and we can put that together and send it and recirculate it. I wanted to also focus on the resolved. Angel, I know we didn't get to that yet because we are going to have to cut this down a little bit more. I think 26 whereases is quite a bit for 3 resolved. But in this space, how do we feel about those 3 points that are being resolved? If you can raise your hand or unmute to.
It's gonna make it for a great YouTube video.
Is it?
Just the quiet parts.
Got it. Yes, Jessica.
I think it's perfect.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so Elsie, do you want to, or does the committee want to proceed with this resolved, and then we'll fill in the whereases after the fact? You want to vote on the position and the
Yeah.
therefores and then fill in the
Correct.
whereases?
Yeah.
Okay, and remember all, like, that's gonna be shared, in advance of full board, then you all get another hack at it there.
Okay. We'll hack away
But
then.
that's so painful. Is this so it's this and then full board? This is it basically.
Yeah, no, but like if we're agreed, if you all agreed tonight, then the whereases are going to reflect what your therefores are. And that'll be your position. So that we're not going to go line by line at full board. God help us. Well, not that we're not. We shouldn't. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
For full board, I mean, Elsie, you're gonna like present this. Would it be possible? Because I feel like, is there a way to preempt what we had to go through when Jessica had to read that thing? Like, is there a way to just summarize? Maybe we can create like a short paragraph summarizing our committee's like resolution.
I mean, yeah,
as a way to
the
present
part
it.
is that, and I think that was unfortunate that happened. I will not read it again, but I think so. My question is, how soon can we get it back so that we can share it with the board ahead of time?
Yeah. So you all are voting Tuesday, right? The 15th. And we should share it by Friday. So between now and Friday, we got to turn it around. So tomorrow, crack a whatever, I'm going to get it done. I'm not doing it tonight, but I'll do it tomorrow.
Okay.
And that's easy enough. And then, like, if I may, I can answer Ivy's question. I think the way that we've restructured the full board agenda is like speaking just exactly to that concern. Is like when the committee chair comes up and speaks on behalf of the committee, that's exactly what they'll be doing. When they present a position of the committee, we had this conversation. These are the points that we agreed on. Therefore, this is what we are recommending. And that, that report should be, should summarize, how did we land here and what is it that we feel strongly about, we being the committee. And then it should, that, in my opinion, should be that, because the reason that, committees are empowered to do the work on these subject areas is for that purpose. If we're relitigating everything at full board, it kind of defeats the purpose of the committee, right? Like, the committee's done its work, and if it's done its work well, which we assume, then we shouldn't have to go through all the punishment of reading an entire resolution into the record just because.
Yeah, and I'll give my opinion. I'm sorry, I lost my power during this whole process. I know I was the one who shook the tree about trying to get us down to one page, but I probably nothing to do with us as a committee, but just as a board member, there seems to be a challenge with the concept of sending things back to committee or not presenting when it's not ready. And that's kind of where I was looking at when I saw this originally, because I think there's a lot of concepts that we want to collaborate and collectively articulate on this document. And then at the same time, I just think we want to, get our best footing, because the way I'm taking it is we're just providing a comment to the zoning text amendment.
Right. Yeah, like what you're doing is, what the board will be doing is submitting its comments on what is being proposed. But to your point about being prepared by full board, like, I will share this document early tomorrow and make it, comments, like open it to comments and edit, so you guys can just go right at it. And then if we can get it out by close of business Friday, so we can make that 3-day advance notification, then we're good.
Okay.
And I don't know, just as a recommendation, Angel and Elsie, I don't know if executive meets before full board, but I've seen it be effective that when executive votes on it, if it doesn't come out of committee, it tends to be less challenged by, and this is my opinion. I wasn't there. I could just hear the sentiment of it. It just goes back to the members not reading the minutes, not being prepared, and then wanting to rehash the conversation all over again like it's the first day. And if we're going to make a sound decision and vote on this, then we need to stick by it with each other and just, and inform our fellow board members. We're on other committees as well. So
yeah, I think your last comment is the key, is like, this is what you all put your hand up for and voted on, and that's what you feel your position is, and you stick by it. That's it. And then there is no, like, you can't ever predict how folks are going to act at a full board, but you can always predict when you present them with something that looks sloppy. You will not be presenting something sloppy. So then you can just, stand united over something that's going to be well presented. This committee doesn't present sloppy stuff.
Agreed. So thank you. That was my comments for process. For the resolution, I'm just having so much computer issues right now. I couldn't see if you were able to capture that comment, like, let it be resolved that, worry about your train stations, and this text amendment is only for elevators. And because the developer beautifies the train station, that you get to save and keep our tax money further down. I could give my own opinions about that, but the longer the short of it, that concept you brought up, I thought that was very, very monumental. In reading a lot of because this is something else I've been picking up, is like backing up the statements of the claim, right? Like, if we're taking a position and we're making a comment, then example, like, we make a resolution, we're making references to documents that we've already approved. They should be behind, like, the resolution, right? Whatever it is, the MIH. And to solidify that concept, I don't know if that makes sense of how I'm articulating it, but.
Sure. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that. That was my thought. Like, you have your resolution, you put up, we have documents that are standing. I mean, name the plan, we got it. Put that behind it, and then of course that emphasis about that MTA shouldn't be giving them zoning credits or an opportunity to overbuild in our space based off of our MIH and our East. You guys get the idea.
To your earlier question, that the thing about the elevators is the first point in the therefore.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jessica and Ivy, and then we're gonna try to.
I was just gonna. Sorry, I was gonna say, I think that at face value, this amendment is promoting accessibility, which seems like a great idea and something obviously we would support. And I feel in my pessimistic self that even if we, recommend that it be denied, it's still going to move forward. And I think that all of these points and leading up to this resolve, that, these allowances are going way above and beyond what they would need to, and they don't include mandatory housing and are going to change the neighborhood significantly when they don't necessarily have to, is like the biggest point. And I think all of the points leading up to that back that up. So just showing that we understand the zoning text amendment and that we've come to this conclusion not lightly, I guess. I
agree. I just don't want it to be as long as Ivy, your point?
I just had a little bit of an issue with the clause, whereas such flexibility in height, setback, and qualification for the bonus introduces unpredictability, whereas zoning should bring predictable building forms. I think I get the sentiment in this, which is that, but to me, I would say it a little bit. First, I was like, I don't like this clause, but I actually think maybe we'd say it a little bit differently, like, the new text amendment allows, like, basically contradicts or like is somewhat antithetical or like counter to the idea or the intent of the zoning code as it's been written.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's because it's unpredictable. I think it's more that it's just like it allows for the zoning to be what's the word, like undermined, basically.
Still on a meeting. Yeah, see, I missed that, man.
I know, I do.
So so like was stated, Angel will pass this out. I think Ivy, you should take a stab at that piece, especially if it's speaking to you. And I agree with the sentiment that you have behind it. But then we can all kind of work through, because there's some stuff that I want to kind of change a little bit of the wording, trying to make it a little bit more condensed as well, but I'll do that online. As far as the resolve and the recommendation, if we are ready to move into that, vote, we can do that now. If I have a motion from any committee member in regards to the resolve for the recommendation that the application be denied or approved, if that's the motion.
Sorry.
Jessica, can you state your motion?
Yes, thank you. Motion to recommend that this app, I guess, sorry, motion to approve the resolution for the denial of the text amendment. Does that make sense?
I think you can just say motion to deny.
Motion to deny.
Motion to deny.
Yeah, with the, and you're adding the recommendations, the 3 points here.
Yes, with the current recommendations.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Ivy, I believe that was you.
Yeah.
Angel, if you can call roll.
Yep, sure. Okay.
Yes.
Give me a second. I appreciate the enthusiasm. Jessica, Jessica Elliott,
Yes.
Elsie Encarnacion,
Yes.
Ivy Hume,
Yes.
Francis Mastrota.
Yes.
Thank you. Jessica Morris is excused. Andrew Padilla,
Yes.
Vinny is absent. Jason Villanueva,
Yay.
thank you. And Candy is absent. The motion passes.
Thank you, Angel, and the committee. You know, it's almost 9, but I think that was the last agenda item, actually, other than for presentations and discussions. Is that correct, Angel?
That was it. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yes.
Yuck. Let's stop that. There we go. I don't want you seeing me reading sports while your meeting's happening.
You see Brooklyn, baby.
No comment on the record.
Thank you.
Yep, that's all you have tonight. Just a reminder that you'll be meeting again on the 22nd. And like I said in the email, I'm sorry, not trying to punish you. But this would have been, we would have still been going till midnight tonight if we would have kept the other items on. I just, you know, I just think that we should always weigh in on all the things that are put before us, no matter the level of interest. I know some things are a little more interesting than some other things. But I think as a practice, we should always at least put them on the agenda. You know, you can always choose to abstain. That's, you know, that's certainly your right, or choose to not comment. But I think we should at least have them on the agenda and give folks in the community an opportunity to weigh in should they want to. So yeah, that'll be the next meeting. It will be a all DCP meeting, so you guys can just let them have it. And then we'll do the votes in July, in addition to a presentation by HPD and EDC regarding the East 125th Development Project, that first, which we haven't had an official report on in a very long time. And we also have Jessica Elliott on the agenda for July. Yeah, like we wrote it down when you asked. I did want to share one thing really quickly. I know it's almost 9. I did have an opportunity to tour part of the One East Harlem building that is part of the East 150th Development Project. Saw the raw community facility space for the cultural space and the affordable retail raw space. They've been getting, you know, a bit of interest in those spaces. Food Bazaar, who will be the anchor retail tenant, the supermarket, will be getting the keys to the space to start their fit out in the next couple of weeks. So that's exciting. That's been a really, really long gestating project. I think it's 15, 16 years. So it's up and it's getting filled up, which is good.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know, forever. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that. I forgot to say that earlier.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't see that email until it was too late to
Yeah, no
attend
worries.
that.
It's really raw, so the tour was a bit uncomfortable. I asked them to get, and they're open to giving us, another walkthrough. Like I asked that they wait for like a month so you can actually kind of walk in there. It was like really raw.
Okay, I think we have so that was. what was it, like,
Jose
over-
from DCP has his hand up.
Yes.
Hey,
Jose.
how are you guys? Thank you very much. I just stepped out of my computer for 1 second. So I know you guys voted to deny the application unless these term recommendations are met, which we did applaud last time we came to present. We did like a recommendation, so we appreciate it sending it to us. My only question was, when are you guys? When is the full board going to see this recommendation and then produce a resolution?
Right. So the full board will be meeting next Tuesday, the 15th, to vote on the recommendation from the committee. Okay. That for the committee and the public's like that's a couple of days after the comment deadline for this application, but we did move up the full board a week to try to get closer to it. Yeah. And typically our sister agencies, give us a grace period. So yeah, we'll have it to you. If they approve it as written by Tuesday, I should have it to you Tuesday night or Wednesday morning.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, no, I think we are giving this. As you guys know, we're working with 59 community boards, so there's going to be a little delays. I believe we had a little like a grace period in there. The other issue, the other question or comment was potentially there is not going to be a follow-up presentation in the hotel's special permit. So if you guys can send me your questions in advance, because we did present to CB11 in the prior meeting, and it's only one person doing the round of show for each community board in Manhattan. So there is very unlikely that the person can come back again and to do the presentation. But if you do have a Q&A or questions that you can prep and send it to me, and I can try to get those answers for you in advance, send it to you, and I'll be in the meeting and try to answer all the questions that I can. But it would be better if I can have like those questions in advance, so I keep saying, I talk to you later about it and I'll follow up. It would be better if you just send me those questions in advance and I can try to follow up. But the other text amendments, they will have a full presentation. Okay, and then we're aiming for each of those between 15 to 20 minutes, with the only exception of the open restaurant that will be a little bit longer because DOT will be doing a portion of that presentation as well. As you know, like DCP is taking charge of the zoning text amendment and what that actually means for the open restaurants, but there is also a component of the roadway program that a lot of the community boards are more interested in the actual component of the roadway program. So we are inviting DOT to do that part of the presentation, although the details of that program are not finalized. We believe that is really good because right now they're taking more input from the community to actually finalize the program. So that's even better, and it's a good opportunity for you guys to raise concerns and also provide recommendations and comments. That's all I had to say today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's important stuff. Yeah, please, committee, look at the stuff. It's up on our website. It's up on DCP website in terms of the text amendments, anything that we can get ahead of time, and any kind of questions that we can formulate and send over and be prepared for after the presentations. Obviously, seeing the presentations and hearing them kind of gives us a little bit more context. So some things might come up in the fly, but if we can come kind of prepared with that, I'm hoping that meeting won't go too long. And so also as a heads up, I won't be at the full board meeting, taking the one time off of like the year. But so yes, please support Angel and make sure nobody beats him up too much or makes him read that resolution. Yeah, Jason, absolutely. Make sure you get them. But other than that, I think we are done unless there's any new business. Nothing on my.
I just have a piece of old business, Madam Chair.
Oh yes, old business.
Yeah. So, and it's good. I don't know if DCP is still on, but I know that we asked in our statement of district needs for this committee to forgive me the little one. He's excited. The long and the short of it, that they were going to start doing to address the digital divide and educating our community about the ULUP. Maybe Andrew want to speak a little bit to it, but the long and the short of it, I want to see if there's maybe we could start, coordinating that process you know, I don't know if the proper words are forum or symposium to try to get those trainings going. Since they claim they have the funds and that they could do the training, it's just up to us to schedule and coordinate.
Andrew, did you want to add to that? It was Andrew that you said, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, sorry, I am also taking notes for today's meeting, so that was my delay there. I would definitely be interested in that. I mean, going over the website, you know, today, you know, there are a lot of new features that weren't there a few years back, and there's a lot of really important information there that folks in our community, you know, probably aren't aware of, and it's also an opportunity to, you know, while it's about I think training on the new digital process, I think it's also an excuse and opportunity to use resources to just get people involved in you know, this process generally, in you know, digitally or otherwise. So if there are resources, I think that's a great idea. I would be up for reaching out you know, to DCP on that and seeing kind of, all right, if they said they have the funds for it, let's, you know, let's go. But I think you know, one thing that Jason had brought up when we were at District Needs and Budget was how we as a committee would fare if they were in some really nice world to respond and say, yep, we're ready. When do you want to schedule it? Like, who would come to that? Who do we, you know, what community partners do we think would have people interested in that? It seems like people become interested in the zoning process at the latest stages of something controversial looking like it's about to happen. So who are folks that we think would be interested in a more preemptive setting? Who are folks that, or how do we maybe get community more interested more preemptively? Whether that's working with you know, schools or different nonprofits here, I don't know. But so I wanted to say, one, I would be down to start that conversation, you know, by reaching out on behalf of the committee to DCP. But then as for our committee, if I'm going to do that, you know, I just think it's something either for us to talk about shortly now, or maybe, you know, at the next meeting to talk about, you know, what kind of folks we would want to come to this if they did come back and say, sure, we're going to do it.
Ivy?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Andrew, if you need help, or I'd definitely be interested in helping to get students or young people attending our meetings or learning more about land use. And I just think it's so important that we can foster this sort of community involvement, especially for young people. I think it really helps get a sense of ownership in the neighborhood. And yeah, I'd be excited to help you with that.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I'm also interested in that, and interested in helping kind of spread the word. We don't want to only have people at the table when there's drama and when there's conflict, but it certainly is important to hear those voices and hope, you know, knowing that they're understanding why they're at the table. But there are many other instances where I expect conflict, and I think that there's going to be some people and no one's really around, and so I wish that was definitely we can have that at those meetings. So I'm also on board and can put that on our agenda as a standing agenda item for old business, I guess, or maybe we can call it like continuous business instead of old business. It just makes it sound old.
I guess I would ask and I'm sorry for cutting you off. I'm sorry, I should have raised my hand. My mistake.
Yes, bad. Nah, go ahead, Andrew.
I was gonna say, I think it would be great if folks in the committee, you know, have ideas of CBOs or schools or just individuals in the neighborhood, maybe interested parties who they think could use training on what the ULERP process is, or, you know, folks who would be, you know, who would be interested in that, like, and you know them in the community, you know, we can just start from our committee. Like, do you think is there anyone you know or you yourself that would like to understand that process better? And you know, are there folks in your networks who would like that? And if we could send that around, I guess, to the committee before maybe our next meeting, that could kind of start things. Because you know, Jason brought up a really good point. You know, what if on the off chance they say, yeah, we want to do this, let's get it done. We do have the money. We weren't lying to you. You know, we want to make sure that we're like, great, ready to go. Sounds awesome.
That's a fair point. I think we can all do that. And I think also we should look at, you know, organizations that exist, such as like even TAs and you know, or, you know, so groups of community members that are out. There's a ton in East Harlem, and there's definitely ways that we can use our networks through just also not just in this committee, but in the board itself, members to reach out to those places. So we can start compiling a list, maybe send out a spreadsheet to start that work. I'd be okay with that. Got that, Angel?
No. That's been all board members talking. I want to encourage that.
We will start a document. I will start
Do that. I love this idea. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is a really good. And then we're gonna go get the money. But we should be ready. You're right, Andrew. We should be ready for when that happens, and be ready to hit the ground running. So thank you for bringing that up, Jason, and Andrew for your input on it, and Ivy for volunteering at this late time. So with that, I think I'm going to, do I need a motion to close the meeting, or can I just?
I have to call the roll.
I forgot about that piece. Angel, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Elsie Encarnacion.
Present.
Ivy Hume.
Present.
Francis Mastroda.
Present.
Andrew Padilla.
Present.
Jason Villanueva.
Presente.
You have quorum. Stay on the line, Jason. I'm going to hear something funny with you. You have quorum.
Good evening. Of course I do. These people are great.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Night, everyone.